Welcome to Search for Signs. My name is Gary Willing. If this information interests you, please press the like and subscribe button and press the bell for notifications. Well, good day to you. It is the 24th of September, and we have some more questions to cover that weren't covered in the last video I put up. Again, if you have a question about Maitreya, the Masters of Wisdom, I always invite you to post your question as a comment. A few of us have emailed me the questions from time to time, and that's fine too, at searchforsigns@mail.com. Now, I do want to say, given the nature of the questions that I'm about to try to answer, I do want to set it up like this. Okay, I've talked about this many times throughout the course of these videos. In no way, shape, or form am I viewing myself as an authority on this information. Knowing the correct answer, you ask me the answer, and then I give you that answer, and that's the end-all and be-all of it. Okay? Now, those people who are asking questions, and those people who are even listening to questions, might actually know more about this subject than I do. It's just the way that we're doing these questions. I basically have the mic. Now, the other thing too is, if I was an authority and somebody asked me a question about Maitreya, the Masters of Wisdom, I give the correct answer, right? You gain all the value and I really gain nothing from it, right? That would be the way it would be set up. But that's not what happens with me. When somebody asks me a question, I inquire, I look, I ask myself, I look at it from different standpoints, and I learn just as much or maybe even more than the person asking the question gets from the answer that I give. So that's why I really appreciate the questions, because I'm learning from this too. It's very important to look at this as a dialogue between you and me, and other people talking about this. But it's also important for each one of us to ask questions for ourselves, right? And a very important question to ask when listening to about this information would be, what? Is there any truth to this? Or is this true, right? Ask yourself that question. Now, you might, through the course of your own inquiry, come up with that for yourself, that there is no truth for you. You might say, no, there's no truth to this. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't fault you for that. I appreciate and see and really respect somebody who could take the time to listen to this information and inquire for themselves and say, there's no truth to this for me. And then they go off and live their life. There's nothing wrong with that. And the person trying to ask these questions or answer these questions, will either be quote unquote proved right, because these things will start to take place. Maitreya will start to be known for who he is. The changes of the world will start to take place. And of course, Maitreya will declare himself as Maitreya on TV. And I'm putting that right in quotation marks. I'll either be proved right or wrong, right? But at least the person took the time to listen and inquire for themselves and move on with their day, right? Now, you might ask this question, the same question. Is there any truth to this? Or is there this information? Or is this true? And the answer that might come up for you is, yes, there's truth to this. Now, the important thing is to start to act on that, and not just listen to this and then do anything, right? Just as when you start to see Maitreya on TV and recognize him as Maitreya, or you maybe don't recognize him until he declares himself on TV as Maitreya, right? And then he starts talking to humanity more and more. We see him on TV all the time, and then get all this wonderful teaching from Maitreya and never do anything with it. You know what I'm saying? It's better to start now, right? And start the inquiry, start the dialogue, start the, always ask yourself, is there truth to this or whatever, and whatever level you believe it in, right? To act in some way. Now, it could be helping in your own way to make known the presence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. That could be something that you see as valuable to the world that you could provide. It could also be helping to SOP save our planet, or both. I don't know. It could also be doing more inquiry within yourself even, and asking yourself more questions about this information, or reading some of this information from the Share International website, or getting one of Benjamin Creme's books and reading it for yourself and doing more inquiry. It's all about inquiry. It's all about self-discovery. This is a discovery for not only the person asking the question, but the person trying to answer the question in the same way, if that makes any sense. But it's very important to create movement in this in some way, shape, or form, right? Now, that being said, like I said, I'm not an authority, and the only difference really between somebody asking some of these questions that I might quote unquote know the answer to, and they don't until I answer that question, is the length of time that I've put into reading this information, but there really is nothing more to it than that. So anyway, hopefully that addresses anything that might come up now or in the future. But all right, now there were some comments that people put up about the last video. We talked about a person who's claiming to channel Maitreya, Tatiana Mikushina. Within that dialogue and that discussion about her, I did say that I'm not saying that I think that she's channeling Maitreya or receiving direct messages from Maitreya or not. It's all for us to decide for ourselves. Is there truth to what she's saying or not? That's all well and good. Okay. Now, within that also, somebody made a comment. She believes Sadhguru is evolved enough to receive direct messages from Maitreya, and that may be true. I don't know. You know, the question, the requirements that came up in that discussion, the three were: is the person evolved enough to receive direct messages from Maitreya is one question, right? About Sadhguru, for instance. He may be. I don't know, right? Is he being, or was he trained by Maitreya or a master to receive direct messages in that way? I don't know either. And then the third requirement would be, is it his job to make known the presence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom in that way based on his direct contact with these masters? That would be the third requirement, I think. So if you look at somebody like Benjamin Creme, he was evolved enough to receive direct messages from Maitreya. It would be overshadowed in that way, to receive direct messages from his master telepathically in that way. And it was also his job, as he saw it, to make known the fact of the presence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom in the world, right? Now, Benjamin Creme had a very unique relationship with his master, even among disciples who have telepathic contact with their masters. His went a kind of a step further, where a look, a touch, a hug from Benjamin Creme is not coming from Benjamin Creme, it's coming from his master. And there was times when I was alone with Ben, and he gave me this look that was much different, and his eyes changed even, and I could tell it was coming from his master and not from him. And so, but yet other disciples don't have that kind of relationship. Now, he said that his master referred to him as his window to the world, and that was the relationship that they had. That's how close it was. A while ago, but sometime after, he started having that relationship with his master, Ben actually asked his master, am I the only one that you have, is your window to the world? And his master said, no, there were others. Now, when I read it in his book, he said he didn't ask him how many or who they were, but the point is that there are disciples who are receiving, who had that closer relationship with Benjamin Creme's own master in the way that he did, but evidently it's not their job to make known the fact of the presence of the Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom in the same way that Benjamin Creme did. So you see what I'm saying? Now, the other comment that somebody put in there, that Maitreya's here, there's no need to send messages through Tatiana, sorry but true. I can see where you're coming from with that, but let's take a look at that question, that statement, right? Benjamin Creme's master some time ago wrote an article about true and false Christ, people who actually believe they're Jesus come back, or believe that they're Maitreya, and present themselves that way, have a group of, maybe a small or large group of followers who believe them to be the awaited teacher, right? That they served a purpose for the masters by doing that, even though what they say might be totally untrue. There might not be a single truth to what they're saying, that they are helping in some way bring about the idea of the fact of the masters. And I include people who claim channeling from these masters, because these masters don't channel. They don't use that as a form of communicating to their disciples in any way, shape, or form. Because channeling involves the emotional astral vehicle. They deal with a mind-to-mind contact with their disciples. So it's a much different way of communicating. But there are those who claim to be channeling Maitreya, or the ascended masters as they like to call it. And what they're saying, there's not one single bit of truth to what they're saying. But yet there's a benefit to the masters for them to do this because they are letting people know about the idea of the masters. People who maybe would not be interested in hearing it coming from somebody like Benjamin Creme. So there's an added benefit to it. Now, even one of the 5 disciples who were picked by Maitreya to make known the fact of his presence in the world, Ben being one of them, the other one being in New York, Geneva, Darjeeling, and Tokyo. The one in Tokyo, who was a woman, because of who she was, she actually started to think that she was Maitreya, believed she was Maitreya, and then eventually, I am Maitreya, and then she created a whole group of followers around her that see her as Maitreya. But even though she missed the opportunity that Benjamin Creme seized to make known the fact of the presence of Maitreya, she still was beneficial to them in some way because she was making known the fact that even though she isn't Maitreya, right? Do you see where I'm coming from with that? Yeah. So like I said, getting it in, I'm not saying that this Tatiana Mikashina is or isn't. I'm just throwing this out there for all of us to inquire about when we hear people who are claiming to be channeling Maitreya or the Masters of Wisdom. Now, there was another one that was very notable, and I can kind of speak on him a little bit because he's passed away. Wayne Peterson. And I've met Wayne Peterson several times because early on when I was a part of the Share International group early on, he was a big part of that group. People looked to him as somewhat of an authority. I never did, but I knew people who did. And he eventually kind of went off in his own direction, claiming to be overshadowed by Maitreya, claiming to receive telepathic messages from Benjamin Creme's master in the same way that Ben did. Now, it created quite a stir and a controversy among the group because they didn't know if there was a lot of people didn't know if there was truth to it or not or whatever. And I think it even kind of, for lack of a better word, upset Ben. And Ben eventually asked his master. His master said, "Don't worry about it. It's okay. Even though what he's saying, there's not a single bit of truth to what he's saying. He is helping to make known the fact of the presence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. Just let him do his thing." Which Benjamin Creme eventually informed the group, like, okay, it's okay. Just let him do his thing. Don't try to interfere or, talk negatively about him. Just let him do his thing and, all will be well. So anyway, hopefully that helps. Alrighty. The first question, do you expect Maitreya to come in how many years or months? That would be a question, of course, that I personally could never answer. Hopefully soon. Hopefully it's tomorrow. I don't know. I kid. But a better question, there's a couple of questions that I think would be better to ask than what do I expect? Okay, first of all, a question would be, when will you recognize him on TV? Now, Maitreya is already speaking on TV, right? And out of the thousands of people who have already heard this channel, for instance, who have listened to me speak about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, even those who are quite frustrated with the fact that they've known about this information for years and still haven't seen him on TV, so maybe there's no truth to it. I would be willing to bet you that there are a significant number of people who have already seen him on TV and just not recognized him yet. So when will you recognize him? Well, I would say be patient and wait. And that's the most important thing that any one of us can do with anything in our life, but let alone when it comes to, Maitreya being, us recognizing him on TV. Be patient and wait. But the waiting isn't just sitting at home doing nothing. The waiting could be out actually doing something about it. Do you see what I'm saying? And then you become more patient. Then you become, okay, well, I'll see him when I see him. I know for myself, I'm not looking through YouTube trying to find videos of Maitreya. In fact, I got rid of all my news channels on my cable TV, and I have the basic of basic cable, so just so I can get local news, local sports coverage from my beloved Falcons teams who suck this year. I guess another year of sucking. You got to embrace the suck, but that's the only reason why I have it. And then, other than that, I find it painful to watch CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, because it's all opinionated. I watch those news when there's a news that needs to be covered, and I do like, from time to time, with a certain degree of moderation, listening to those, political pundits and so forth. But other than that, I don't listen to them all the time. It's too painful for me to try to endure, right? Just to maybe, hopefully, one time see my beloved teacher who I've been waiting for decades to see on TV. To endure that type of opinions day in and day out about Trump or Biden or whoever, just to maybe get a glimpse of Maitreya on TV, I would rather wait. So, now, Maitreya also did say, and I'm going to quote him, "Those who chase after me have already lost me." So the best thing to do is not even to try to find it. Now, the other question would be, that I think is much better than that question, do you expect Maitreya to come out in how many years or months, is when will humanity wake up to the problems that we've created, that we need to face as a people, and start to solve those problems? Because Maitreya, if he, is speaking about these problems on TV in any way, shape, or form, which I know he is, right? We have to do it ourselves, and he can't give any more pieces of the puzzle to the solutions of those problems until we do the first thing that he suggests, which is start to look at creating justice in the world, which we only can do that by sharing the world's resources. So I don't know in how he's speaking and where he's speaking and in regards to what he's speaking about, whether it's politics or economics or whatever, but humanity has apparently not responded well enough yet for him to go and take it up a notch, So that would be the main thing, to look at. I think those two questions. When will you recognize him on TV? Because he's already speaking on TV. And then when will humanity wake up to the problems of the world and start to respond to what he's been saying? So our world leaders are not helping in this regard. They're harming in this regard because they are keeping humanity enthralled. We have to bring it more in line with what the masters are talking about. The danger of commercialization has been over the years. He describes it as it has its throat on humanity, squeezing out any generous or creative thought. It's squeezing the life force out of humanity. Our own vitality is in danger because of it, really. But every aspect of our life is being squeezed out by commercialization. If you can't see it, step back for a second and look at it objectively and inquire about it for yourself, because you can see it rather clearly in every aspect of your life. Commercialization, how it's squeezing it out of your own creativity, your own generosity. Let somebody else do it. I need to get to work. Those kind of things. It's everywhere. And we can't move. Humanity is not moving because of it. It's not moving in any direction because of it. And so we have to look at it like this. And I do think that 2020 is the year that we are breaking that, that mold, I think, of commercialization. But it squeezes out everything. Even looking at it as a simple example in everybody's life, planned obsolescence of appliances or a phone. Companies create faulty machinery in order for it to fail in a certain amount of time in order for us to buy new ones. They already probably have I bet you inventors have even gone to Whirlpool and said, I have the perfect motor or compressor for this refrigerator. It lasts 20 years and will never fail, right? And they go, why would we do that? It would be better for us financially in our bottom line to create something that only lasts 2 or 3 years in order for the consumer to have to turn around and buy another one, would it not? See what I'm saying? It's squeezing out any kind of creative thought, generosity in the same way, and it's leading us to where we lead such separate lives from each other because we can't afford, and we don't have the energy or the vitality to even think about somebody else. We have to think about each day, what we have to do for each day, each day, each day. And I saw when the shock of the lockdown happened on people, it was like a huge snow day. I see it every time there's a snow day. People forget about going to work. Everyone's playing hooky and they act like little kids out in the snow. It's beautiful to see, right? And I started to see that a little bit when it came from the shock of the lockdowns of the coronavirus, right? And now we're kind of getting back into where we were, because we have to start, in order to survive, you have to plug into that system, in that matrix, as they call it, right? But you can see it, right? So humanity is not responding, I think, to what Maitreya is saying, basically because of commercialization and the inertia that it creates. So, but, like I said, I'll either be proved right or wrong, and if Maitreya is on TV, and eventually the changes will start to happen. So anyway, hopefully that helps. Now, the last question that really got me thinking was, who does Maitreya believe or teaches is God? I want to be very clear, okay, about this, and try to listen to me as much as you can when I say this. If you only listen to the first part of the answer to this question, this is really the most important part, and then everything else is that I talk about is hopefully important, but not as important as this. Every word that Maitreya utters, speaks about, elucidates on, describes, talks about, whether he's talking about politics, economics, the educational system, about the environment, whatever it is, he is teaching humanity about God. Every word that he ever utters will be that. So, who he is as an example relating to other people, he will be an example about teaching, as a teaching about God. So there will be times where he's talking about the self, or in self-realization, I'm sure very specifically, but anything he's talking about will be about God. Even his humorous anecdotes, which will be very funny, and we'll all laugh and chuckle, he's using that as a tool to teach us about God. Now, the other question I want to, before I go talking about that a little further, the other question I want you to ask, or look to ask, that's the wrong way of saying it. What would be a better way of saying it? It might also be valuable to you to ask the question, who do I believe or teach is God? Too, right? So let's look at it like that. We'll talk about that in both those things. Now, who does Maitreya believe or teach is God? I don't think he believes in God. Now, I know a lot of my fundamentalist Christians who live under a rock, and when I say certain things, they kind of crawl out from underneath that rock and claim he's the Antichrist and everything like this. If they just happen to be listening to this part of the video, of course, oh, see, I told you the Antichrist is going to deny God. That's not what I'm saying at all. Not at all. But Maitreya doesn't believe in God. God's knowing God is an awareness. It's not a belief, right? The other thing is, Maitreya said, insofar as man can relate to man, man can so relate to God. So that's a core part of his teaching about God, right? So you can look at it a couple of different ways. You can look at it as, you can't remove yourself from society like monks and priests have done over the centuries, right? And that will get you closer to God. You have to relate to man too. So you can't also say you love God and love Jesus and bathe in the blood of Jesus and hate everyone around you or hate those who disagree with you. You can't do that either, right? It also could mean that if your heart is truly opening up and you are becoming aware of God, then you also must see it as your purpose to help end suffering in the world. Because you can't allow even one person to die of hunger and claim to be a follower of Jesus, even. You can't. So, but the other way of looking at it, and this goes in, this really, how do I say it, talks about what I was talking about earlier, where when people ask me questions, I actually learned from it too, right? Is I actually, based on your question and based on what I started talking or started thinking about, man as man relates to man, so can man relate to God, right? I started thinking about it in a different way, and I learned a lot from it. Is the ancients, for instance, they viewed God as a warrior or a hunter, right? Because they themselves were warriors and hunters. They prayed to that God for a good feast, a good hunt, a good kill, the winning of a battle, and so forth, right? Now, and I'm picking on the Christians because my background is Christianity, but I could say the same thing about Muslims. But the fundamentalist Christian would say, well, I only have one true God. Their God is a false God, right? Well, is it? Is it just as are you invalidating somebody who was a hunter who prayed to God that for a good hunt? But yet I know Christians even to this day who go to church every Sunday, who believe Jesus is Christ and pray to Jesus for their sports team to win. So you could say you went from the sublime to the ridiculous, right? But you see where I'm coming from with this? So Krishnamurti, who I think exemplifies a lot of what you're talking about Maitreya's teachings about God, and I do recommend any one of you, if you so choose, to go on YouTube and look at some of these videos and watch some of these videos coming from the Krishnamurti when he's talking to the people that he was talking to about God. Because anyway, we'll talk about him in a second. But he said a very good question. He asked a very good question. He said, "Who created whom? Did God create man, or did man create God?" Now, if this little Indian fella, who seemed quite meek and quite, he looked like a little rabbit. He was so unarmed as a person, right? Were to say this to a group of fundamentalist Southern Baptists in rural South Carolina or Georgia, while they're all eating fried chicken and drinking sweet tea, it would have been as if somebody had taken a baseball bat to a hornet's nest. You know what I'm saying? Whoa, how dare you say something as blasphemous as that? But if you really look at the question that he was asking, there's truth to it. And it goes very much in line with what I was thinking about, the other way of thinking about what Maitreya said. Insofar as man can relate to man, man can so relate to God, right? If you are a hunter or a warrior, your God is going to be a hunter and a warrior. If you are a critical and very judgmental person, then God is going to be not only critical and judgmental of you, but is going to be critical and judgmental of others, right? If you're perhaps very much of a self-righteous person, well, then of course your belief is right and your God doesn't, everybody else is deceived, right? And so therefore your God is the only true God, right? If you are perhaps a very laid-back person, very agnostic maybe, I live a good life, I try not to harm people, if I harm somebody, I try to make amends, then your God is going to be laid-back God. If you're a Christian, you got laid-back Jesus, maybe surfer Jesus, ride the waves, it's going to be okay kind of God, right? If perhaps you are full of a lot of desire, then your God is going to bless you. And we've all heard these people, "Oh, did you see my new car outside, my new Mercedes? God blessed me with that." Or, "I just got that new promotion. I am so blessed," right? And we hear it all the time. And I'm not knocking the people that say those things, but it's just, you see where I'm coming from? To say that God blesses you, even if you're not saying God doesn't bless other people, but if you just say God blesses you, it's the same thing as saying the sun only shines on me. You know what I'm saying? The sun shines on everybody, right? So God blesses everybody. It doesn't just bless you. Did God really bless that person with that new car? No. So you see where I'm getting? We create our own God based on who we are and how we relate to other people and how we relate to ourselves is the God that we created. And Krishnamurti even said there was 300,000 gods that were worshipped in India. Now, there are those Christians, of course, if they heard that statement, will say, we only have the one true God that we worship. It's Jesus Christ. And even though they are all worshiping a God by name of Jesus Christ, each one of them is worshiping a different God, because each one, if you talk to all the Christians I've ever spoken to, they all have a very, very, very different interpretation of who and what Jesus is and who and what God is. Therefore, they can do or say or be however they want to be based on how they believe it. So if they believed in Jesus and they had a different perspective of Jesus and allowed other people's perspectives to be okay, and they were fine with that, then I wouldn't say what I'm about to say. But there are 2 billion Christians or so, right? They all have they're all worshiping 2 billion different gods, because they all have very different views on who God is, and they do not accept other people's view on who God is. So, or even Jesus, right? And I get it all the time on my channel. You're deceived, you're this. Am I really? Or am I just talking about something different than you? Maybe I'm challenging your beliefs in a way. I'm not even claiming that I'm correct or right or true. And yet they say I'm deceived. And I put that out there all the time. I'm not saying this is truth. You inquire for yourself whether you think it's true or not. That's the most important thing to do, right? But yet they get threatened by it, right? So think about it from this, insofar as man can relate to man, man can so relate to God. Now, the other side of it, too, is Maitreya will be teaching, also about the art of self-realization. Now, that's just a word. It's just a word like God or Yahweh or Allah. It means nothing unless you look at what it really is. So Maitreya will not be speaking about God in terms of ideology or belief. He'll be speaking about it in terms of we have to become aware of who and what God is. In order to do that, you have to start by looking at who and what is not God. God is not belief. God is not an ideology. Same thing with you, in each one of us, not just you personally, right? Are you really your name? Or is that just a name? My name is Gary Willing, but I do say I'm Gary. I do say that all the time, right? But do I really believe that? That's just a name that was put on me. My parents named me that, but that's not really who I am. I mean, half my family when I was young called me Jake. Did I change from being who I am to a different person because my cousins and my grandparents on my dad's side called me Jake, and my cousins and my grandparents on my mom's side called me Gary? Was I 2 different people? There's people who've even called me an asshole before. Does that make me an asshole? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, maybe to them, but I mean, not, you get what I'm coming from? So it's just, these are just names. Now, Maitreya says that the process to become more aware of who you are and aware of what you are not is to 3 things. He keeps it very simple: honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. If you look at somebody who has true honesty of mind, the person that comes to my mind would be Krishnamurti, because when you hear him speak about God or the ending of suffering or how to rid yourself of bad habits, it's coming from a person who is a good example of what honesty of mind is, right? We have to think one thing. We all think one thing, we all say something different and do something entirely different. Maitreya says it all has to line up. We have to see that, what we think and what we say and what we do all line up. And Krishnamurti is a good example. Of course, when we see Maitreya on TV, he will be an example of that. People put the claim that Maitreya is going to exalt himself above God. Not only is he not going to do that, he's not going to exalt himself above even the most humble of humanity. So he won't come out claiming to be an authority either, but yet he won't look at somebody else as being an authority. So when you see him interact with the most humble of persons, watch how he acts with that, because he's teaching you about who and what God is by that action and how he's relating to him. If you see how he relates to the world leaders of the world, who most people get very intimidated by speaking to the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of England or this country or that country, you'll see a person who's not intimidated by that because he doesn't see them as an authority either. And then when you see him interact with people who perhaps hate him because they see him as the Antichrist, but yet he loves them and respects them and relates to them the same way that he would relate to someone who's working moment to moment to help save and restore the planet. You will see the same person, right? Never exalting himself above anybody, let alone God, right? But also, he's going to talk about sincerity of spirit. What is that? As an artist, when I'm starting to paint, I start to forget about my daily routine. I forget about my job. I forget about my worries. I don't worry so much about the future. I'm just kind of focusing in on the painting, right? Well, you might not be a painter, but he says that's, anybody can experience, sincerity of spirit, even when you're having a heart-to-heart conversation with a close friend or loved one, and you forget about time. Oh my gosh, we've been talking for the last 3 hours. Didn't realize it, right? It's way into the wee hours of the morning. I got to go to bed. I got to go to work tomorrow. You totally forget about having to go to work the next day. That's a good example of sincerity of spirit. And then the third one might say it's the most difficult or challenging, but that doesn't really describe it. It really is the one that should be looked at every single day or every moment of every day if you can, or whatever. Being aware, being alert of who and what you are not. And so you can't see who you are, but you can start to realize and recognize who and what you are not. And when it becomes automatic and habitual that that's not me, that's not me, that's not me. I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I am, that self or whatever name you put to it, it doesn't matter, right? You start to recognize it as that and you start to distance yourself. So he would say, and I'll end it with this, a part of his teachings will be to not inquire or ask, why are you angry or why are you happy? But the better question would be to ask, who is angry? Who is depressed? Who is this? And when you do that and you start to inquire about that, you start to distance yourself between your own ideology, your own belief, and your own emotions, your own thoughts, because those aren't you. So we can talk more about it in the future, but this is obviously getting very lengthy. But anyway, I hope you have a great day. And again, I really appreciate and thank all those who ask questions. And help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.